Well guys, hello again, Mike here with Hardware Canucks, and if you've been watching my content on the channel, you will know two things about me. The first thing is the fact that I absolutely love products that deliver the best bang for your buck. The other thing that I have a passion for is, of course, the ITX market, because it's proof again and again and again that great things can come in small packages. And that's why I've got these here in front of me. I've benchmarked almost 20 low profile coolers for ITX builds. One of the lowest priced ones stood out. It was this one, the ID Cooling IS50X V2. And now ID Cooling is releasing its successor, the IS55. And instead of developing this within a vacuum, they looked towards the community, took our criticisms to heart, and made it better than the 50X in every way possible. As you can tell, I'm ultra excited about this. It might be a simple cooler, but when I'm passionate about something, I want to put it on camera. So I'm guessing that's what you guys are here for too. But you know what else excites me? That's these new cases from Fantex.
The all-new G360A by Fantex, bringing updated design inside and out to refresh the P360A chassis with a legendary breathable, durable mesh front panel for improved cooling and that awesome illumination peeking through via the 3 DRGB front fans. The interior is now made to accommodate 360mm radiators at the front and top, longer GPU support, and user-friendly assembly. The dual color options are great for an all-white build with complementing cooler, fans, and PSU, so check out the new Fantex G360A cases down below.
All right, let's jump into this thing very quickly, because from all outside appearances, the IS50X V2, which is this guy right here, and the IS55 look like pretty much the same cooler, but there's so many changes that have gone from one into the other. So much so that actually I can't even really say that the IS55 is just a new version of the IS50X. It's actually a brand new cooler from top to bottom. First of all, the 55s are available in 3 different versions. There's black and white editions, each of which have an ARGB fan, and there's also a basic version that doesn't have any ARGB bling at all. But there's something you need to know here, guys. That white version, it isn't completely white. It just uses a white fan on top of a standard aluminum heatsink. And even though this is a brand new cooler, there's a few similarities between the IS55 and IS50X V2. They both use an identical 120mm by 15mm fan, and they're the same height too. Well, okay, technically, the IS55 is 2mm shorter than the IS50X V2, but you wouldn't know it when looking at the coolers next to one another. Past that, what you get with the IS55 is a much larger fin array that extends right to the fan's outer boundaries. There's also a section of the heatsink that drops downwards and gives some additional height to some of the fins. That leads to more thermal capacity and a weight increase from 385 grams all the way up to 450 grams. This is no lightweight, guys. And while the 55 still has 5 6mm diameter heat pipes, ID Cooling's thrown the HDT base into the trash and went with a well-finished, solid base housing a copper core. And it might not seem like all that much, but believe it or not, moving away from that HDT base, that's sort of a big deal. Look, I've been a critic of these type of HDT bases for quite a while right now, because back in the day when we had larger CPU cores that spread out their heat over a larger area, these things were perfectly efficient. The problem now is that we have smaller cores and a lot denser technologies, which makes something like this completely inefficient. And that's why, yes, something like a solid core is a lot more expensive to produce, but at the same time, it should give a lot better results on today's modern processors. But the biggest change here has actually been with the installation. While the IS50 series came with a bunch of very small, very frustrating parts and 4 tiny bolts instead of a backplate, the IS55 takes a simpler and much better approach. There's a backplate for Intel systems and the hardware necessary to reuse the AMD stock backplate, along with a pre-installed retention arm on the cooler itself. This thing takes a quick 5 minutes to install instead of the 10 minutes of pure frustration of the older cooler. One other thing that I need to mention is that now that the Ryzen 7000 series is released, the IS55X is compatible with the AM5 socket, whereas a lot of the other ID Cooling low profile coolers are not. That's because this cooler actually reuses the stock AMD backplate. I have to give ID Cooling some credit for adding some nice touches to this too. So first of all, they have included a handy dandy Phillips head screwdriver. On such a low priced cooler, that's good in my books. The other thing they did is they increased the amount of thermal compound that they give you. So instead of just like 1 or 1.5 applications, you get enough here for about 3 to 4 pretty good applications. The other thing they did is they are giving you a couple of screws so you can mount a standard thickness 120 millimeter fan on this. But the one thing that I really wanted to mention, and it's a little bit of a red flag for some of you, is installation of this onto a ITX motherboard. In standard configuration, part of the heatsink is actually cantilevered over the memory slots, and that limits RAM height to just 33 millimeters. In practical terms, you'll probably need to run bare DRAM modules, since even super slim Corsair LPX series won't actually fit here. On the other hand, if you have a slightly lower motherboard I/O area without all sorts of crazy heatsinks and whatnot, you can just flip the IS55 the other way. That allows for full height memory, but don't go assuming you'll be able to do this every single time. In this config, it fits without any problem on this pretty basic ASRock ITX board, since it just clears the uncovered I/O. But it's a no-go on a B550 Strix we have here at the office, because it just smashes right into that board's heatsink. Anyways, by now I'm guessing that you're wondering, okay, so what are the prices for these coolers? Both the white and black versions with an ARGB fan go for around $40 US, which is the exact same price as the IS50X V2. There's also a more basic version without that RGB that goes for about $35 right now, but you have to take note that cheaper one is only available from overseas sellers right now. And look, I'm pressing ID Cooling to bring it to North America. Now, I'm sure also what you were wondering about is, what about performance? Does this thing live up to my high expectations? And the answer to that is absolutely. So let's start off at 65 watts. And look, I know that 65 watts is a very, very low TDP level, but it's still pretty common for the ITX market. And here the IS50X V2 already showed some amazing results by beating the IS60 Evo and the AXP 100 while maintaining super low noise levels. But the IS55 beats it hands down and posts some of the best results I've ever seen from a low profile cooler. I mean, it only needed 38 decibels to get the same result as the IS60 did when that one was running at 42 decibels. That's just nuts. And when compared to the metric ton of other heatsinks in this category, the IS55 is simply a chart topper. I mean, it completely owns a bunch of the other coolers that are taller and much, much more expensive. Now, moving on to 95 watts, and remember, the IS50X V2 and AXP 100 copper did really well here last time. But the IS55 basically splits the difference between the two by beating the 50 by between 2 and 3 degrees and actually matching the Thermalright cooler at 38 decibel output. The only other cooler that's even close is the IS60 Evo, but again, that thing needs to get to screaming loud noise levels just to keep up. Now, I know some of the other coolers in this chart might be able to deliver this kind of performance with a simple fan swap, but what makes the IS55 so impressive is that it gets these temperatures in stock form. And you know what that means? That means that you don't have to take off this fan and buy another high-end fan that probably costs almost as much as the IS55 just to get the best results, or to get competitive results for that matter. So anyways, the last test that I wanted to talk about is, of course, gaming. And I think this was pretty much a foregone conclusion, wasn't it? While the IS55X V2 was already a leader here, the IS55 one-ups it by about a degree or two across the entire noise range. Meanwhile, some of the other coolers start to struggle in this test. And when we add all those other heatsinks at 38 decibels, the only thing that even comes close here is the Noctua L12 Ghost. And remember, that's a whole lot more expensive, not to mention quite a bit higher than the IS55. Alright, so if you've watched any of my other videos for coolers in the past, and I mean, if you haven't, please go ahead. They're in our catalog. Go and watch them. You know that we are not done with testing quite yet. Why? Because ID Cooling, they give you those 4 screws to mount a slightly larger fan onto this thing. So what are we going to do? Well, we're going to break out that good old trusty Gentle Typhoon again and see if that has any effect on performance. Overall, the Gentle Typhoon did boost cooling by a good 2 to 3 degrees across every single test, which is pretty impressive. But you also have to ask yourself, is that kind of boost worth it considering you're slapping a $25 fan onto a $35 or $40 cooler? Personally, I don't think so, but if you're in a position where you absolutely need more horsepower, it's certainly a better option than just buying a brand new cooler. Well, I guess it's conclusion time, and if you just skipped to this part, congratulations. You're going to get everything right here. So this is probably going to be the shortest conclusion of all time. The IS-55 has taken everything that I loved about the original IS-50 and improved in the areas where I had some critiques about it in the first place. It is exactly what ID Cooling is known for doing. Basically, what they're doing is they're delivering an amazing cooler with great performance, good mounting, at an extremely affordable price. But if there's only one thing that I can caution people about when it comes to this cooler, is just make sure your motherboard and memory are compatible with it. That was, like I was saying before, the one red flag because of increasing the size of the heatsink, increasing its cooling capacity. There are a couple of trade-offs when it comes to overall motherboard compatibility. But other than that, I would say this is simply one of, if not the best, low-profile cooler that you can buy right now. So I guess that's pretty much it for me. I'm Mike with Hardware Canucks. I hope you love this content. I absolutely love this cooler. If you can find it and you need it for your ITX build, go out and buy it. And I guess I'm going to see you in the next one.